Ron.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say it the first time I said Ron?
Because it's pronounced Aaron.
You done messed up, Ron.
Ron is right here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Scientology done messed up. Let me just get my computer on Do Not Disturb. Guys, late 2022, I did a video talking about a local Clearwater, Florida woman named Whitney Mills. Not born and raised in Scientology, and got into Scientology later on in life. I can't remember if it was in her late teens, early 20s, through a boyfriend. Made it all the way up to Scientology's highest levels of its Bridge to Total Freedom, OT8. As a relatively young woman, I mean, when at the end of Whitney's life, I believe she was only in her 40s, perhaps early 40s. And I explained the details surrounding how her life ended and how Scientology was, in my opinion, directly responsible and culpable for how her life ended. And I also discussed the involvement of notorious Scientologist physician, Dr. David Minkoff, who was involved in the end of Lisa McPherson's life, which ended up being one of the biggest legal flaps Scientology had ever faced. And I discussed in that video how I believed Whitney Mills was basically Lisa McPherson all over again for Scientology, not only for Scientology, but also for Dr. David Minkoff. And I told you at that time that I believed this was not going to go away, that justice was going to be served, and that people would be held responsible. And it has taken a long time, but the day has finally come that a lawsuit has been filed for wrongful death in the case of Whitney Mills against the Church of Scientology Flag Service Organization in Clearwater, Florida, the Church of Scientology Flagship Service Organization, that's also known as the Free Winds, Scientology ship that bounces around between Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, the Church of Scientology of Tampa, otherwise known as the Tampa Org, the Church of Scientology Mission of Bel Air, very interesting. That's the Bel Air mission. And also the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists, IASA, International Association of Scientologists Administrations. I do have a copy of the entire lawsuit, which I'm going to explore with you guys in another video later on. For the purposes of today's video, I want to take you through what has been reported on this by the Tampa Bay Times. And by the way, in about 10 minutes, or as soon as I can finish this video, whichever comes later, I'm going to be hosting the Daily Scientology Recap on Natalie Webster's channel, Life After a Cult. And I have this live stream programmed to auto redirect to that video. So just so you guys know. Okay, let's take a look at what the Tampa Bay Times has reported. Scientology kept woman from mental health care before her death, lawsuit says. The mother of Whitney Mills says high-ranking members failed to prevent her daughter's suicide in their care. That is Whitney Mills. Oh, God, she was only 40 years old. Whitney Mills was 40 years old when she died in 2022. Okay. The mother of a Clearwater woman who died by suicide in 2022 has sued the Church of Scientology, alleging high-ranking church members kept her daughter from seeking mental health treatment while under their supervision and failed to prevent her death. In early 2022, Whitney Mills, a 40-year-old real estate agent and high-level Scientologist, was experiencing a mental health crisis that had landed her in the emergency room twice with insomnia, anxiety, and increased heart rate, the suit asserts. The suit alleges that members of Scientology's Sea Organization workforce assigned handlers to stay with Whitney Mills at her downtown apartment around the clock beginning in February 2022. They coordinated her medical care with a Scientologist physician who diagnosed Whitney Mills with Lyme disease and cancer, quote, while largely ignoring her very real psychosis and mental health crisis, according to the lawsuit. I just remembered, I want to add here that Dr. David Minkoff, the physician who is now implicated in the death of a second Scientologist woman, is the father of the famous purse designer or fashion designer, Rebecca Minkoff. The same Rebecca Minkoff, who's the newest cast member of Real Housewives of New York, I think it is. And I honestly am shocked that Scientology would allow Rebecca Minkoff to appear in a reality show that is so heavily based in drama, knowing that Scientology is going to get dragged into the storyline one way or the other, whether Rebecca talks about it on camera or not. Certainly, people who talk about this stuff, that Rebecca's involvement in the Real Housewives of New York is going to provide a huge opportunity for the people who talk about this stuff to talk about this stuff and to have extra attention and eyeballs and ears attracted to that sort of coverage. Add on top of that, that Rebecca's father, David Minkoff, is now implicated in a second death of a young Scientologist woman, and I think somebody done messed up. Now, Dr. David Minkoff has not yet been sued as an individual, but if you ask me, that's on the way. Okay, let's get back to the news coverage. Okay, Scientology has strict beliefs against traditional mental health and psychiatry, thus foreclosing Whitney from obtaining the exact treatment she needed, the lawsuit says. Because Scientology and its workers assumed responsibility for Whitney during this period and oversaw highly questionable alternative medical treatments, the family alleges the church is liable for her death. The wrongful death lawsuit was filed by Layla Mills, who is not a Scientologist, on May 11th in Pinellas County Circuit Court on behalf of her daughter's estate. It names 6 Scientology corporate entities as defendants of 3 counts of negligence. It draws parallels to the case of Scientology parishioner Lisa McPherson, who died in 1995 after being held at Scientology's Fort Harrison Hotel for 17 days. Lisa McPherson and Whitney Mills were treated by the same doctor, Dr. David Minkoff. Lisa McPherson's case brought international attention to Scientology practices. The state attorney filed 2 felony charges against Scientology in connection to the death, charges that were later dropped. In a statement to the Tampa Bay Times, Scientology spokesman Ben Shaw called Whitney Mills' death an unfortunate tragedy, but denied that she was even under the church's care. Somebody done messed up. To quote my favorite puppet here. Sorry. Every now and then I get an opportunity to use the Mr. Bill, oh no. Ben Shaw has just blatantly lied. There is already ample evidence to show that Whitney Mills was under, what does he say? Under the church's care, under Scientology's care. Now, I'm sure when Ben Shaw issues that statement, he's using very specific, selective, and literal interpretations of under the church's care. But by any reasonable understanding or definition of those words, believe me, Whitney Mills was under the church's care. She and separate from whose care she was directly under, she had recently finished OT8. She had recently finished Superpower, which doesn't mean anything to normal people in the normal world, but means something very important to Scientologists inside the cult bubble. Everything about the end of Whitney Mills' life is something that is going to be devastating to Scientology and will have a meaningful impact, in my opinion, on members who are inside the bubble who become aware of the actual facts of this case. Okay, Scientology policy is crystal clear. This is a quote from Ben Shaw, so this is a lie. Scientology policy is crystal clear. If a Scientologist is in need of medical care, he or she must see a medical doctor. Any and all decisions regarding medical treatment are solely the decision of the individual. Scientology does not provide medical advice. All right, well, that's a selectively true statement, which we can get into later. The lawsuit alleges that Scientology officials knew that Whitney Mills was a risk to herself and banned her from stepping foot on Scientology's flag land base in downtown Clearwater. They provided nonstop supervision at her apartment instead. Quote, to prevent another event like the death of Lisa McPherson, unquote. Scientology teaches that any distress should be handled with its courses and spiritual counseling called auditing, according to the lawsuit, and that parishioners like Whitney Mills, who've reached the advanced level of OT8 or operating thetan 8, can cure ailments with their mind. Traditional mental health therapy and psychiatry are considered evils that Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard compared to terrorism. Alrighty. Text and email messages between Whitney Mills, her caretakers, and C organization staff members included in the lawsuit show that she was receiving Scientology auditing off campus for her symptoms. Whitney suffered from unbearable pressure in her head and anxiety, according to the lawsuit, but her condition was worsening. Quote, it's causing me to feel like I'm dying and causing me psychosis, anxiety, panicking. I'm getting intrusive bad thoughts, Whitney Mills emailed to a Sea Org member on March 12th, 2022, according to the lawsuit. I literally can't take another day of this horrific horror movie I'm living, Whitney Mills texted to a caretaker on May 1st, 2022. As her symptoms persisted, Whitney Mills in April 2022 requested a form of verbal auditing intended to help a person's thetan or spirit leave the body after they die, according to text messages cited in the lawsuit. While this indicated that she was suicidal, the lawsuit states that caretakers either intentionally or negligently left her alone for several hours on May 12, 2022. Whitney Mills attempted suicide that evening and died at a hospital the next day. Ben Shaw said that the complaint is meritless and invents Scientology beliefs and practices that do not exist. Ben Shaw is lying. David Minkoff, the doctor, is not named as a defendant in the complaint, but Ramon Rasco, a partner with the Miami-based Podhurst Orsak law firm who is representing Whitney Mills' estate, said he has put David Minkoff on notice. State law requires notice be provided to defendants 90 days before a medical malpractice lawsuit is filed. Dr. David Minkoff did not respond to an email and 2 voice messages left at his office Wednesday and Thursday. Lisa McPherson's case began when paramedics took her to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation following a traffic crash. Several Scientologists showed up to the hospital to object, citing Scientology's stance against psychiatry. They took her to Scientology's Fort Harrison Hotel. Scientology staff members trying to nurse Lisa McPherson through a mental breakdown called Dr. David Minkoff, who prescribed Valium and a muscle relaxant without examining her. After 17 days, Scientology staff members drove Lisa McPherson to see Dr. David Minkoff at a hospital in Newport Richey, where he pronounced her dead. In 2001, by the way, you guys understand, there's a hospital 100 yards from where Lisa McPherson was staying in downtown Clearwater. Instead of going to that hospital, because Scientology didn't want the local hospital to see the condition of their member, they drove her to, did it say Palm Harbor or Newport Richey? Hold on. Did it say... Newport Richey is like 45 minutes to 60 minutes north of Clearwater, depending on traffic. They drove her an hour away when a very hot, reputable hospital was 30 seconds away. That tells you everything you need to know about their motivations and what they were trying to conceal. Okay, Florida's Board of Medicine suspended David Minkoff's license for a year for his actions in the Lisa McPherson case. Lisa McPherson's estate also filed a wrongful death lawsuit. Dr. David Minkoff settled his portion of that lawsuit for $100,000 in 1998, and Scientology reached a confidential settlement in 2004. With Whitney Mills, Dr. David Minkoff had diagnosed her with a cancerous ovarian cyst and Lyme disease, and prescribed a series of alternative treatments, including an anti-parasitic drug that cost her $20,000, the lawsuit maintains. But Whitney Mills' autopsy showed that the cyst was benign. Medical experts hired by Whitney Mills' estate concluded she did not describe symptoms of Lyme disease and was actually suffering from severe depression, according to the lawsuit. I'll add some editorialization here, that Dr. David Minkoff is notorious for prescribing people with Lyme disease. It is amazing how many Clearwater-based Scientologists suffer from Lyme disease, despite having no interest or practice or habit of going out into the brush or camping or anywhere where you might come into contact with ticks. The reason Dr. David Minkoff prescribes so many Scientologists with Lyme disease is because, or diagnoses so many people with Lyme disease, is because he's not allowed to diagnose them with other conditions that might actually explain certain mental phenomena Scientologists are experiencing, because Scientologists aren't allowed to recognize that any sort of mental illness or any mental conditions are even real. Scientologists believe that all mental conditions come from things going on in your mind that Scientology can fix. You're not allowed to be diagnosed with depression. Dr. David Minkoff is a medical physician who is not allowed to ever diagnose a Scientologist with something like depression or anxiety or anything at all. And so his default diagnosis is Lyme disease. You guys would be shocked to know how many Scientologists allegedly have Lyme disease, according to Dr. David Minkoff. In text messages cited in the lawsuit, Whitney Mills begged Dr. David Minkoff for anything else to treat her changed personality, lack of emotion, depression, and other symptoms. But Dr. David Minkoff responded with quackery, the lawsuit says, encouraging Whitney Mills to instead apply her mental superpowers that she obtained by reaching the highest level of spiritual attainment in Scientology, called OT8. Dr. David Minkoff had a duty of care to refer Whitney Mills to a mental health professional, even if his religious beliefs forbade it, the lawsuit states. On April 20, 2022, Whitney Mills told one of her caretakers via text that she had asked a SEERG member who oversees auditing at the Flag Service Org for the type of auditing session to help drop the body. That is a euphemism in Scientology for dying. She said she later learned about this form of auditing from one of the caretakers. That's right, folks. One of Whitney Mills' caretakers, who was overseeing a young, healthy woman of 40 years old, told her about a Scientology auditing process that would help her die. It does not get much more disgusting than this. In his statement, Ben Shaw denied that such a session for dying exists. Uh-oh, you done messed up, Ben Shaw. But Bruce Hines, a former technical correction director in the Sea organization who administered auditing, told the Tampa Bay Times that the end of life assist is a verbal command created by L. Ron Hubbard to help Thetans leave a body and find a new one. If she was asking for it, she clearly wanted to die, Bruce Hines told the Tampa Bay Times on Thursday. Whitney Mills worried that she would be in trouble for asking Scientology for the end of life assist, but a caretaker responded that they know you're desperate. God. This is according to text messages cited in the lawsuit. It is not clear from text messages and emails included in the lawsuit if a Scientology auditor actually delivered this end-of-life auditing. By not intervening when Whitney Mills made reference to dying, these caretakers not only failed to prevent Whitney Mills' suicide, but also encouraged it, the lawsuit states. Guys, I may not know much. I may just be someone who grew up in a cult and never went to high school. I think Scientology is kind of screwed on this one. I think Scientology is very screwed on this one. And I hope they pay. I hope they pay for what they did in a major, major way. Let's see here. Sharona says, R.I.P. Whitney Mills. May justice prevail. Yes. Body Illusion says her last days must have been horrifying. Ken Grover says, this is so sad. Unbelievable. Scientologists, I believe, most of them, would be horrified to learn the details of how Scientology officials, Sea Org members, directors of processing, case supervisors handled Whitney Mills and contributed to her death. I've seen the text messages between Whitney and her caretakers. No Scientologist could deny that there is no question Scientology's watchers, Whitney Mills watchers, she was put under watch. She was put under 24-hour watch by a series, rotating team of 3 different Scientologists. The reason she was under watch is because she was suicidal. The director of processing and the case supervisor knew exactly Whitney Mills' condition. How was Whitney Mills? Who decided to take Whitney Mills off of watch. And was it because they'd already delivered her the end of life assist and said, okay, we're going to leave you alone now? No matter what the answer is to these questions, it is horrible for Scientology. And I hope Whitney's family gets everything coming to them in this lawsuit. Julie Markham says, this is so disgusting. I hope they pay. Yeah. On the one hand, I hope Scientology settles this lawsuit immediately and Whitney Mills' family gets everything that they deserve. On the other hand, I hope Scientology gets involved in a long, drawn-out discovery process that allows us all collectively the opportunity to yet again just put on display to the entire world just how horribly destructive, abusive, and uncaring Scientology's beliefs and practices are, particularly when it comes to anyone who's struggling with any mental health issues, disabilities, anything at all. They say Scientology is here to make the able more able. We're here to take people who are already at a high level and take them to a higher level. What that really means is we don't really have any interest, care. In fact, we have somewhat of a disdain for anyone we consider a little bit lower level than able. And I can tell you that Scientology considers anyone who's suffering from any sort of mental health issues to essentially be degraded beings, not really able, just kind of a nuisance, kind of a weight, a burden on the organization. And they care more about the organization itself than the well-being of its individual members, especially if you don't have cash, credit, or check ready to pay for that next service. Anyway, guys, it's really disgusting and a lot more to come on this. I'm going to do another video later on going through the actual complaint of the entire lawsuit. In the meantime, guys, hang out here. Join me over at hang out. If you stay with this video, it'll redirect to Natalie's channel, and I'll do the daily Scientology recap. All right, guys, I'll see you over there.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click